The coagulation panel is a set of lab tests that monitor different aspects of a patient's bleeding status, or coagulability. This is often presented as a three-way diagram, known as a Mercedes diagram. Let's take a cruise in our Benz to help you keep the values of this diagram straight. Ah, the summer is finally here. Nothing beats a great road trip. You probably remember those from before you started med school. The warm summer sun, the top down with the wind blowing through your hair. Ugh, gas again? The car is beautiful, but this gas mileage, total garbage. Do I smell smoke? Uh-oh, I hope everything is okay with the engine. Let's stop at this gas station here to take a look. Alright, open up the hood and let's see what's going on. See that front emblem? That's right, here at Pixarize, you ride in style in a Mercedes-Benz. Coincidentally, Mercedes also happens to be the colloquial name for the coagulation diagram. If you look at this image, you'll notice that the three prongs of the Mercedes symbols create three spaces. These three-way prongs helps me remember the Mercedes shape of the coagulation panel diagram. Here it is overlaid for context. Each of these spaces actually holds a different lab value. But more on that later. For now, just remember to draw out the Mercedes symbol to start your diagram. Whoa, full service. This gas station is the bomb. This gas jockey is giving my car the full treatment. He's even cleaning the windshield with paper towels. You know what paper towels remind me of? That's right, the letters PT. You know, since we call toilet paper TP, it only follows that PT stands for paper towels. And you know what else PT reminds me of? That's right, prothrombin time. Prothrombin time is used to evaluate one of the pathways of the coagulation cascade. PT is also the first lab value we'll discuss in this panel, and it goes in the top left space. Next, notice how this helpful guy is cleaning from the outside of the car. You might even say he is extrinsic, or outside the Mercedes. Let the guy's billowing roll of PT outside of the car remind you that PT measures the extrinsic pathway of coagulation. PT primarily affects the coagulation factors 1, 2, 5, 7, and 10, of which factor 7 is unique to the extrinsic pathway. Factor 7 is special because it responds to substances coming from outside the blood vessel, like tissue factor or subendothelial collagen, to initiate coagulation. In other words, the extrinsic pathway can be initiated by damage or substance from outside or extrinsic to the blood vessel. We won't go too deep into the specifics here, but the important thing to remember is that PT is involved in the extrinsic pathway. Just think back to this station employee outside or extrinsic to the car, and cleaning the windshield with a roll of paper towels, and you'll never forget that PT is involved in the extrinsic pathway. Before I go load up on snacks, I gotta finish off these chips. Gotta get every last crumb. Let me shoving these potato chips into my face remind you of PTT, or partial thromboplastin time, a measure of coagulation. It's the PTT potato. Like potato. Everyone calls potato PTT for short, right? Right, PTT for potato. Anyways, PTT occupies the top right spot of the three-way diagram. To easily peg which side of the diagram PT and PTT are on, just envision yourself looking through the emblem at me in the driver's seat. Because we are in the US, I drive on the left side of the car, which will correspond to your right side, or the right side of the diagram. By elimination, it should be easy to remember that PT is located on the other side. Afterwards, notice how I'm sitting inside the car? Because I'm the driver, and I always eat inside my car. I need to finish off these snacks. Don't rush me! Use this to remember the fact that PTT measures the intrinsic and common pathways of coagulation, but really just focus on the intrinsic bit here. I'm inside the car eating potato chips to help you remember that PTT measures the intrinsic pathway. The intrinsic pathway is comprised by coagulation factors 8, 9, 11, and 12, and these factors respond to trauma originating within the blood vessel. In other words, these factors generally initiate coagulation in response to events happening inside or intrinsic to the blood vessel. Just remember me eating potato chips inside the car to tie PTT to the intrinsic pathway. If you thought the body of the car was nice, I dare you to take a look at this sweet German-engineered engine. This international internal engine should remind you of INR, or International Normalized Ratio. The INR is a value that is primarily used in patients taking warfarin as a way to easily determine therapeutic values, i.e., to see if the blood thinner is actually working. An INR under 1.1 is generally considered normal in healthy people not on warfarin, whereas patients taking warfarin need to aim for an INR of 2 to 3 to achieve therapeutic blood thinning. One more point here. The INR, or International Normalized Ratio, is exactly what it sounds like. A ratio of a patient's coagulation state normalized against that of the general population. So which coagulation value is used to make this comparison? Well, see how the roll of paper towels is streaming down into the car interior? This should remind you that PT is used for the calculation of INR. The INR is basically a ratio of the patient's PT value divided by a normal PT value, as determined by the population mean. The INR effectively creates easier numbers to work with than the PT, since dividing your number by the population mean essentially tells you how coagulable you are compared to the normal person. At an INR of 1, your patient is exactly the same as the average, making you, well, normal. On the other hand, an INR of 2 achieved with warfarin treatment is basically saying that your blood needs twice as long as the mean to clot after exposure to extrinsic factors like tissue factor. Be careful here not to confuse INR with the PTT. Just remember the role of PT outside unraveling over this international German engine to remind you that INR is calculated from the PT. Alright, the windshield is clear, I've restocked on snacks, and the engine is looking freaking sweet. Let's sum up. The Mercedes diagram is used by medical professionals as a method to organize different values to give an overall picture of a patient's coagulability status. It is divided into 3 sections, one for prothrombin time, or PT, one for partial thromboplastin time, or PTT, and one for the International Normalized Ratio, or INR. PT measures the extrinsic pathway. PTT measures the intrinsic pathway, and INR is a ratio to compare the PT of the patient to the mean PT of a population to check out coagulation time. Think back to this Mercedes diagram and you'll be cruising through your rotations. Until next time.